He slammed her against the wall. But in that moment, his whole world was about to collapse. Because the woman he just touched was the most powerful person in the entire Navy, and he had no idea. Blue light filled the command deck. Servers hummed like sleeping beasts. This was LC-1 Cerberus, the Navy's most advanced cyber facility. Captain Marcus Thorne stood in the center, confident, proud, every inch of him screaming authority. But his confidence met silence. A woman stood near the main command node wearing a plain green flight suit. No name tag, no rank. Just calm eyes fixed on a tablet. Thorne frowned. She didn't look like she belonged there. "Ma'am," he barked, "this is Fleet Cybernetics Command, not a coffee shop." The crew laughed nervously, but she didn't react, didn't even look up. That silence cut deep. His pride couldn't take it. He marched forward, boots echoing across the steel floor. "Are you deaf?" he shouted. Still no answer. He grabbed her arm, spun her around, and slammed her against the cold wall. The metallic sound echoed through the room. Everyone froze. "Listen to me," Thorne hissed. "You're in a restricted zone. Identify yourself or I'll have you thrown in the brig." Her eyes lifted, calm, cold, steady as the sea before a storm. No fear, no anger, just silence. From the corner of the room, Commodore Jennings watched. The way she braced herself, her stance low and balanced, that wasn't fear. That was training. The kind of control only elite operatives had. He felt a chill and then an alarm. Just one beep at first, then another. The main display flickered. One line of red code appeared. Then another. The hum of the room turned to chaos. Lights flashed red. Alarms screamed. Thorne released her and turned. "What the hell is happening?" "Sir, we've lost control," a young ensign shouted. "The system's locking us out." The holographic map dissolved into static. Every screen went red. A robotic voice echoed, cold and lifeless. "System integrity compromised." "Protocol Omega engaged," Thorne froze. Protocol Omega was a last resort lockdown, something that should never activate on its own. Now it had. He shouted orders. "Override it!" "Get engineers on the line." Now, but nothing worked. Every console was dead, every command ignored. The bridge was collapsing into panic, and in the middle of all that chaos, she didn't move. Her tablet still glowed calm and blue. She watched the data storm like it was nothing. Everyone else shouted. She stood silent. Thorne's voice cracked. "Do something!" She didn't look at him, didn't say a word. She already knew what was happening. And she knew exactly what was about to happen next. The red lights flickered harder. The voice came again. "Containment breach imminent. Evacuate immediately." This wasn't a simulation anymore. The system had gone rogue. If it vented the cooling gas from the quantum core, they'd all freeze in seconds. Thorne shouted into a dead comms panel, but no one heard him. His authority meant nothing. And then she moved, calm, precise, like time itself slowed for her. She walked to a side console everyone had ignored, pulled a small cable from her pocket, plugged it into her tablet. Her fingers began to move, not typing, flowing, fast, controlled, like a pianist playing a song only she knew. Lines of code flashed across her screen, dense and complex. Thorne turned. "Stop, you'll make it worse." She ignored him. Her eyes locked on the main display. Then on the screen as a thin white line appeared. It spread, forming a circle, order fighting back against chaos. The alarms began to fall silent. One by one, the red lights faded to blue. The static cleared. The hum returned in just 90 seconds. She had saved everything. The room went silent. Every console flickered back to life. The air felt lighter, like the ship itself was breathing again. She unplugged her cable, coiled it neatly, slipped it back into her pocket, then turned toward Captain Thorne. Her calm grey eyes met his again, and for the first time, he understood what kind of mistake he had made. The heavy steel door hissed open. Commodore Jennings stepped inside with 2 armed Marines. His face was cold, serious, unreadable. The crew stood frozen. The air was thick with tension. Jennings didn't look at anyone else. His eyes went straight to her. The woman in the plain green flight suit. The one who had just saved them all. He stopped 3 feet away, stood tall and saluted. Sharp, formal, perfect. Every officer on the deck stared in shock. That salute wasn't to an analyst. It was to a superior officer, Admiral Rostova, Jennings said quietly. "My apologies for the reception. I wasn't informed you'd be inspecting the facility in person. Cerberus is yours to command." The word hit the room like thunder. "Admiral," the crew gasped. Thorne went white. His body locked in disbelief. He had just assaulted an admiral. Not just any admiral, the one who built the system itself. His throat went dry. The floor seemed to tilt under his feet. Jennings kept his salute raised until she gave the smallest nod. Calm, composed, unbothered. Then she spoke, her voice steady and clear. "Commodore, your facility has a flaw in its core design. Protocol Omega has a recursive loop that can be triggered by a specific data packet from the Black Spear war game. It locks the system into believing it's under attack, repeating the same command until total shutdown." Her eyes turned to Thorne. "Your command staff wasn't prepared for that. They know how to operate the system, not how to understand it. That is your true vulnerability." Her tone was calm, not angry. It felt more like a diagnosis than an insult. And that made it hurt even more. Jennings turned to a nearby console and brought up a holographic file. The air filled with scrolling data, her record. Name: Admiral Eva Rostova Unit, U.S. Cyber Command, Special Operations Directorate. Title: Director. Project Chimera Medals. Distinguished Service Medal. Defense Superior Service Medal. Legion of Merit. Then came the most chilling line. Mission classification top secret, eyes only. Everyone on that deck understood what that meant. She wasn't just an admiral. She was the architect, the mind behind the entire Cerberus project. Jennings turned to Thorne. His voice dropped low and sharp. "Captain Thorne, Admiral Rostova designed this facility. She wrote the code that runs your entire command. You are relieved of duty, effective immediately. The Marines will escort you to your quarters to await court-martial." Thorne didn't speak. Couldn't. His arrogance had evaporated, his pride shattered. He looked at Rostova one last time, searching her face for any sign of anger or satisfaction. He found none. Only quiet, steady eyes that saw straight through him. To her, he wasn't an enemy. He was just an error. The Marines took his arms and led him away. The crew watched in silence. They knew they had just witnessed something extraordinary. Not a punishment, a correction. A reminder that real power doesn't shout. It simply acts. The story spread like wildfire across the base, then across the entire Navy. They didn't call it the Thorne incident. That would have given him too much credit. They called it Rostova's correction, or, in whispers, the day the ghost walked the bridge. People told the story in different ways. Some said she rewrote the entire system in 30 seconds. Others swore the lights pulsed with her heartbeat as she fixed the machine. But one truth never changed. A captain's arrogance had met an admiral's competence. And the result was a lesson the Navy would never forget. Captain Marcus Thorne was never seen on a command deck again. No ceremony. No farewell. No headlines. He wasn't dismissed with noise or shame. He was quietly reassigned to a dusty logistics depot in the middle of nowhere. A place filled with boxes, numbers, and silence. A place where his loud voice and sharp orders meant nothing. The official report said he failed to manage a system crisis, but everyone knew the truth. He had committed the one mistake no officer should ever make. He had mistaken silence for weakness. That was his downfall. Days turned into weeks. Thorne sat behind a desk piled with endless reports. No more flashing consoles. No more crew standing at attention. Just the hum of old fans and the scratching sound of pens on paper. And in that quiet, her eyes haunted him. Those grey eyes, calm, steady, and unreadable. He would see them reflected in the glass of his office window. They didn't accuse him. They didn't forgive him. They simply existed, reminding him of what he had become. For the first time in his career, he started to listen more than he spoke. He began to notice people he'd ignored before. The quiet workers who kept everything running. The petty officer who could drive a forklift through a space barely wide enough for a door. The clerk who tracked thousands of supplies without ever making a mistake. They didn't shout. They didn't seek attention. They just worked well with precision, patience, and pride. And Thorne began to understand something he never had before. Power isn't in the voice. It's in the work. It's in the calm hands that fix what others break. It's in the quiet that never needs to prove itself. His transformation was slow, painful, but real. He stopped trying to be the loudest man in the room and started trying to be the most useful. Meanwhile, back at the Cerberus facility, a quiet revolution was happening. Admiral Rostova stayed there for another week. Not as a commander, but as a teacher. She didn't call meetings or give speeches. She walked the decks quietly, observing. Sometimes she'd stop beside a young technician and ask a question. Why did you code it this way? Is there a simpler path? Can you explain this choice? No judgment, no anger, just curiosity. She didn't teach them to obey. She taught them to think. To see the system not as a machine to be used, but as a living structure to be understood. The same young ensign who first noticed the failure, his name was Miller, became her shadow. He wasn't the smartest or the fastest, but he was curious, and he had no ego. One day he pulled up the code she used to fix the system. He stared at it for hours, trying to understand. When she walked by, he looked up and said softly, "Admiral, this isn't just code. It's like poetry." Rostova smiled, the kind of smile that appears for half a second and vanishes. "Efficiency," she said, "is its own form of elegance, Ensign. Never use 10 words when 2 will do. That's true for code, and for leadership." Those words stuck. Within days, the crew had stenciled that quote onto a small plaque. They placed it right where Thorne had pinned her to the wall. They called it the Admiral's Corner. It wasn't meant to glorify her. It was a reminder of humility, of calm strength, of what real leadership looks like. Officers started touching that plaque before simulations, a quiet ritual for good luck, a promise to lead with competence, not arrogance. The story spread through every naval school, every training base, every command ship. It became a lesson told to young cadets. Professors called it Rostova's correction. At the Naval Academy, it turned into a case study in ethics. Instructors gave cadets the report of the incident, without telling them how it ended. Then they asked one question. What was the first failure? Most said, the system flaw. Wrong. Others said, Captain Thorne's panic. Wrong again. Finally, one cadet raised his hand and said, the first failure was assumption. The captain assumed what he saw was all there was, and that was the right answer. That single sentence became the heart of the lesson. It wasn't about code or technology. It was about ego, about how arrogance blinds you, about how prejudice makes you miss the truth standing right in front of you. They learned that true strength doesn't need an audience. True brilliance doesn't need recognition. The real professionals, and in every field, are the quiet ones. The ones who show up, solve the problem, and expect no applause. They just do their job perfectly. That's what Admiral Rostova represented. The quiet professional, the person who leads without shouting, commands without demanding, and earns respect without asking for it. She didn't leave behind a speech or a grand farewell. She left a mindset, a new standard of what leadership should mean. Her presence changed Cerberus. The culture shifted. People started listening to each other more. They stopped measuring rank by noise and started measuring by skill. The loud ones grew quiet. The quiet ones grew confident. And for the first time, the facility felt alive. Not with fear or command, but with understanding. All because one woman walked in without a name tag and showed them what true authority looks like. Months passed. The memory of that day still echoed through Cerberus. But it was no longer remembered with fear. It was remembered with pride. Admiral Rostova had left, quietly just as she came. No announcement. No ceremony. Only a single message sent to Commodore Jennings before dawn. Continue the work. That was all. But even in her absence, her presence lingered in every corner of that place, in the steady rhythm of keyboards, in the calm confidence of the crew, in the quiet blue glow of the command deck. People had changed. They had begun to carry themselves differently, more composed, more thoughtful, more precise. No one shouted anymore. No one tried to prove how smart they were. Now every word carried weight. Every silence carried respect. The plaque in the Admiral's corner became sacred. Before a big simulation, officers would stop, place their hand on that cold steel and whisper under their breath, "Efficiency is elegance." It was no longer just a quote. It had become a way of life. Even the young ensign, Miller, felt its weight. He'd stayed longer at the base, studying the code Rostova had touched. Her logic, her patterns, the way her mind built solutions from chaos. He wanted to understand it, to live up to it. Then one morning, a small unmarked package arrived for him. No sender, no label. Just his name written in tiny letters. Inside was a single data slate. He powered it on and froze. The screen displayed her signature. A single line of text. Project Chimera, master file, annotated copy. She had sent him the original code. Her code, the blueprint for Cerberus itself. Every line annotated with her thoughts, her reasoning, her logic. It wasn't just a gift, it was trust. Our torch passed from one quiet professional to another. Miller understood instantly what it meant. She wasn't asking him to worship her work. She was asking him to improve it, to evolve it, to keep the flame alive. And that's when he realized something profound. Legacy isn't about statues or medals. It's about what lives on inside others. It's knowledge carried forward. It's wisdom that keeps breathing long after you're gone. He looked around the room, at the technicians, at the officers, at the hum of the servers, and he finally understood her silence. Her silence wasn't distance. It was depth. It wasn't coldness. It was focus. It was the space where true mastery lives. He smiled faintly and whispered, "Thank you, Admiral." From that day on, Cerberus changed forever. It became a model for how the Navy trained its next generation. They called it the Rostova Standard, a culture where arrogance was weakness and understanding was strength. Cadets were told the story every year. Some thought it was exaggerated. Some didn't believe it at all. But then they'd visit Cerberus, see the plaque and feel the silence in that corner. And they'd know. Because silence has a sound. And competence has a presence. Even without her there, Rostova's lesson echoed through every corridor, every base, every command center. The idea that true leadership doesn't roar. It doesn't threaten. It doesn't demand attention. It simply leads quietly, consistently, with purpose. And somewhere far away, in another classified facility, Admiral Rostova sat alone in a dim office reading reports. The world had no idea she was there. No medals on her chest, no cameras. Just another day of work. She didn't need applause. She didn't crave validation. She cared about one thing only: results. Her grey eyes scanned lines of code, the same calm focus as always. Somewhere deep down, she knew that Cerberus had found its balance, that the next generation understood the lesson. That quiet strength had finally found its voice. She leaned back, exhaled softly, and whispered to herself, "Good. They're learning." Outside, dawn was breaking. The first light touched the edge of her desk, glinting off a small metal coin that read, "Efficiency is elegance." That was her legacy, not fame. Not rank, not noise, but a living idea that the greatest strength in this world is often unseen. That true power doesn't shout, it simply is. And in every command deck, every control room, and every soul who still believes in quiet competence, her spirit remained, the ghost who once walked the bridge, never truly left it.